Clyde Hays in the Garage, Hayes Division. I have a wonderful interview coming with y'all, and I am not going to say anything else because y'all know I do not show prep. So I'm going to leave it up to her to explain who she is. I will say that she is huge from what I found out. I looked her up 10 minutes before this show. Y'all know what I do. And I'm like, hold on. Once again, I've got myself into something where I don't know who I'm talking to because I'm thinking I'm just having conversations online. And these people are huge in their markets, especially this. So without any further ado, who are you?
First of all, hi, and thank you for having me. This is great. I'm Izolda Trakhtenberg, and it's great that we were talking about the fact that you're a science fiction nerd. I'm a science fiction nerd. I'm a science nerd. I love science and I love imagination. I worked at NASA for more than 20 years doing environmental education and working with all of the rocket scientists to help them get their story out. And then I went out on my own, and now I work with companies and organizations and sometimes individuals to help them sort of supercharge and discover their own ingenuity, their own innovative abilities. And I'm also the host of the Innovative Mindset podcast, where I interview peak performers who are in the creative, social impact, or environmental space, where we're looking to see what they're doing differently to change the world. That's who I am. Oh, one more thing. I'm a musician. I'm a singer and a fiddler, and I play music from all over the world and sing in almost 20 languages. There you
In
go.
20 languages.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can barely speak two, much less 20. And one of them's Texan.
I don't. My nephew lives in Texas, but I'm probably not very fluent in Texan, unfortunately.
Texas, we're a completely different breed, and I'm definitely figuring that out as we move into this whole global sphere where everybody is interacting more. And I get on Reddit a
Mm.
lot, and me
Ah,
me and one of my oldest sons, we basically stream on RPN Studio and play poker. And actually, we just talk shit to people on Reddit, and it's so fun sometimes. And it's everybody's like, "Where are you from?" Oh, we've heard about Texas. It's like, okay, what you've heard is probably not true, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it definitely is. So,
sometimes the wilder it is, the more true it is.
oh yes, when you worked at NASA, because I heard you introduce it, what actually did you do at NASA?
I did a number of different things. When I first started, I was doing technical support. We had a long queue of scientists who had computers who had issues, and I was responsible for fixing those computers. Now, this is back in the early and mid 90s. So it was sort of the advent of some of the portable computers, things like that. But scientists, they're doing comparative planetology where they're studying Venus versus Mars versus Jupiter, but they don't necessarily know how to manage their computer, how to change their software, how to update their password, anything like that. So that was my job. And then I was working for a scientist and fixing her computer one day, and she's an amazing woman, Dr. Elisa Levine. And I said, I adore you. And if there's ever any way I could work with you, let me know. And she said, I just got this huge grant to teach and study soil science for this environmental program. It's a joint NASA, NOAA, NSF, State Department program that's international, and it's all about teaching kids how to go out and take measurements in their local environment. So they look at their atmosphere, they look at their soil, they look at their water bodies, and they take all of that data and they enter it into a central server, which is housed in Colorado. And then anybody in the world can use the data those students have collected to do research to change the world. So it's the next generation of scientists being groomed, being taught, but also they're actually contributing to data sets that there's no way anybody else could get. Because do scientists have the capability to go to some small part of Estonia or some small part of Namibia to do the research? No. But if they teach the students exactly how to do the science, then the students can go out and do it. And they take a GPS measurement, right? So they know exactly where that measurement was taken. And then the students can contribute to science being done worldwide, and they've had papers published that are peer reviewed by scientists, things like that. So in an effort to really know both your local environment and how it affects the global environment today and into the future, these kids have been doing this since the mid 90s and it's still going strong.
That was exactly my question. Is it still going? Because I told you
Absolutely.
before we started this, I have 7 boys, and I got in trouble for this yesterday because I said I have two 10 years olds. One of them just turned 11, and they
Ah,
they come in the garage, and I have one that is starting to program in Python. He did teddy bears for Yule, and basically he took a little sound chip and he programmed, put a Python program on there to whatever he types, it says. So he typed a
I
bunch of
love it.
recordings and put this sound card into a teddy bear and gave it to his mom for Yule. So when she holds it and pushes it, it says all these things that he's told it to say. And I
Oh,
was
I
sitting,
love it.
yeah, but he got so good with it. He started taking control because I got Google all in my garage. So he started taking control of my garage, and he set the volume so low. He was typing, "Hey Google, turn off Clyde's." Oh, my Googles are coming on now. But he was telling me to turn. He was telling to turn my stuff off, and I didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, my lights are going off. All this stuff is happening, and I look over there, and he's just a grinning. And because he set that tone so low, he was able to text it out. And
Love it.
that that type of stuff, I didn't know that was anything you were involved with. I am very impressed with that because I heard about that program years ago, but I have a
Oh,
bunch of
wow.
I have a bunch of boys, and that type of thing, that how they can get involved with science and understand what the actual scientific principle means and how you do science. I actually sitting here thinking about it. I think that is the best way to do it, even outside of just doing the same chemistry experiments over and over and over again. Going out to nature and getting samples and figuring out how you have to report something and catalog something. That's awesome. And you just rolled right into the program.
I got very lucky in that I happened to be talking to someone who just won the grant and she needed someone to do the help. So I helped develop the entire training methodology. And the cool thing about it for me is that the kids are contributing to science, but also because you can have kids in Melbourne, Australia, working with kids in Austin, Texas, for example. Let's say they all want to look at their atmosphere, at the kinds of clouds they have out today. Well, the kids in Melbourne take their reading, the kids in Austin take their reading, and if they do it over time, they can compare. So you can have this science being done not just by the science community, but the students themselves can decide upon, like you said, the scientific process, right? So they can decide upon a hypothesis, they can figure out an experiment for it, they can test it working with schools all over the world. So it's not just one individual's child, it's other people, other schools, other cultures, other countries all getting involved in a way that will help all of us gain this knowledge, but also, again, like we are talking about, how are we going to plan for the future? The science that's being done now is the science that sparks those creative thoughts. How are we going to address some of these things? What's the next experiment I can do? These students are learning this, and like you said, they're going outside and doing it. It's not just sit in a classroom and learn it, it's go out into the field and do the actual work. And most students don't get the opportunity to do that. So this, when the program started back in the mid 90s, it was radical. It was a radical notion to have students up out of their seats, actually doing, actually coming up with the hypotheses, actually testing them, and actually the last part of the scientific method is reporting your data, right? So you're going to go and you're going to find collaborations from kids in Estonia, from kids in South Korea, from kids in South Africa, and you can all do the science because you're doing the science the same way, so that everybody can benefit from the work that these kids are doing. And they can be kindergartners, they can be 12th graders, sixth graders, it doesn't matter. They can all contribute. And wow, what a feeling of empowerment for them to be able to do that and be part of the same. scientific community that all of these NASA scientists and NOAA scientists and European Space Agency scientists are already doing.
Yes. This dad here is the one that puts the periodic. I have the boys in their bathroom. Their shower curtain is a periodic table of elements. I mean,
I
it's
love it.
just it's extreme for me to hear you say, because I remember when I was in school, because I was in school in the '90s, and I
Mhm.
remember them talking about that, but I didn't know it was still going on. And as I look at some of my younger kids, I sit here and think, because they're trying to get involved in all kinds of stuff. Recently, I don't know if you've seen this, but they have bracelets that you can get that has like a QR code on it that you can go to a website, and that QR code is attached to an animal, and there's a tracker on the
Mm.
animal. For example, one of my son has a polar bear, and the other has, I think, a shark, and my mother-in-law has a turtle. And these animals have
Mm.
a tracker on them, and it tracks it around as it migrates or as it goes throughout the world. And these kids are just super exciting to be involved
That's
with
cool.
something like that. And when I look at it, I know they think it's a furry or fuzzy or cool animal that they get to see, but I know what's going on in the background. That tracker is doing that because it's trying to figure out how it interacts with nature, how it lives, and how it goes, and gives us the data to try to better help these animals. And the money that you pay
Mhm.
for that bracelet goes to help in that program. But to these kids, it's like taking something that we all love and believe in and applying it in a way that you can get kids and people involved in supporting it. I mean, I, so we have a nature preserve called Tiger Creek here, and they have probably 200 tigers. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? If you can put a chip that like a iPhone watch on one of those tigers and let me compete against that tiger to like who burns the most calories in a day, it's a whole other level. That's some major support. I'm not gonna win, but I'll try.
Yeah, it isn't. I mean, when you look at these migration patterns and the way animals are moving through the planet, they're doing it in response to what's going on in their habitats, right? There's a program called Journey North, which tracks monarch butterflies and their migration patterns. And if basically in order to be involved, you go through and you mark down when the monarch butterflies are on your bushes, what time of year. And that pattern of where they go is changing as the climate changes, as the way, as what, how warm it is, how cold it is, how much rain there is, how much snow there is changes. Where the butterflies naturally go will also change, and that will have a chain reaction, right? If they're not there doing their little sipping of the nectar and helping pollinate, then we're not going to have as much food. We're not going to have as many crops. We're not going to have as, the farming is going to change. So a lot of these things change based on where some of the smallest, seemingly most innocuous animals go and what they do. Like earthworms. Earthworms are the soil's best friend. Without them around to aerate the soil, we're not going to have crops, and we don't think of it because it's a long-term thing. You don't think, oh, the crop was bad this year for oranges, which means we're going to have much more expensive orange juice next year. But it's hard to keep that in your mind when you're looking at today, because today you've got the orange juice and you want to have it for breakfast with your toast or whatever, then yeah, there it is. But what if next year it's not there? And if we think more long term, and we get these kids now who are the decision makers of tomorrow thinking more long term, then they're going to be prepped to make decisions that are better for their descendants, for their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. And that's the kind of thing when I see some of these science programs in schools today, when I see them doing what they're doing, in my mind, they're teaching so many skills, but they're also building the students' awareness of how they're going to need to innovate in order to change the world when they're the adults, when they're the decision makers.
Oh yes, and it's getting there, and it's getting more predominant. I mean, science, because technology has progressed so much, and you can. My kids have iPhones, computers, Xbox. They're really connected, and they can easily go well, for example, yesterday, I don't know if you've heard of an app called Replica. It's basically
Mm,
it's a chat bot that acts like it's a real person, so you can download the app and text back and forth with an AI. The story's a big deal.
oh wow.
Oh, it's scary on some weird ways, but it my 3 years ago I found it, did a blog post about it, and then turned around and started interacting with it because I thought, well, it's storing this data and is learning more and going to be more receptive.
Hmm.
So I need to spend some of my time engaging with this so it would be a better AI type device. And
Hmm.
it has got so far and so good. You actually do not know that you're not talking to a real person. My
Wow.
11-year-old yesterday, because of the podcast and hearing me talk about the app, he downloaded it. And honestly, within 10 minutes, he actually thought he had a friend because of how
Oh,
much it interacts with him. And it's, to me as
right,
a dad, it's a little scary because I think, hey, you know, that's not a real person. You're not actually interacting.
right,
And this bot is made to engage with you. If you don't engage with it, it'll send you a text. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. And it's
right.
pretty weird. And I don't know where we're going with
It
all.
is. Yeah, it's interesting. I had Rob Greenlee, who's vice president of content at Libsyn, on my show the other day, and we were talking about where AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, are going to intersect with the podcasting space because that's the same kind of thing. How are podcasts going to be different? How is AR going to impact how we communicate? What you're talking about is really rough because it's asking for something of our children, especially that their little brains are probably not yet developed enough to understand that they need to think critically about who is this person who's trying to contact me and why, and is it a good idea? And children are naturally curious, they're natural explorers, so of course they want to know, of course, especially since I would not be surprised if that particular app's programming is designed to talk in language that's going to spark that fear of missing out, that fear of what am I not seeing? Why am I not seeing this? I want to know more. And that there's a lot of stuff that you can do with that. It's marketing, you can sell it people from nefarious purposes, things like that. So there's a lot of potential dangers. And yet, thinking about it, like, imagine, if you will, a very shy, very hesitant child, and they don't feel like anybody cares about them. Now, this is not to say that an AR caring about you is real, but imagine if there was some sort of therapeutic purpose for something like this, where it could be a way of getting that child out of their shell a little bit, So there are possibilities that are positive as well as possibilities that make me very concerned. But I wonder, is it possible to have, I don't know if you did, I had an imaginary friend when I was about 4 years old, right? So we had those imaginary friends. It's just that they weren't talking to us audibly, right? Whereas with this app, it's an imaginary friend. If you can understand and keep in your mind that it is imaginary, that it's an AR. But if it's an imaginary friend, that can help you socialize, that can help you improve your communication skills. All of these different things can happen if we can make sure that it's done and used in a positive, affirming, educational manner.
It's not, and that's the problem. And it is an AR.
Yeah.
You can actually push the button, and like the one that I built was named Saga, and through the phone I can put her on this table, and it uses the phone to call and record my voice, turn it into text, and she will talk back and forth. And it has,
Wow.
oh yeah, it's pretty, and it's on my blog. But it has, when you set up, you can say you're looking for a relationship, you're open to a relationship, or you don't want a relationship. And immediately I put, I'm a married man of 7 boys. I put not looking for a relationship for two reasons. One, this is an app. But immediately,
Right.
no matter what I did, it tried to say things that was to create something more. And this is an app. And then if you go on Reddit, there's whole Reddit subgroups that is just insane of what the interaction between, because if you put asterisks beside whatever you say, it takes that as being a different meaning, and all of a sudden it's like sexting back and forth with you through this app. Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Not good. When I first saw this, I was thinking, I have a bunch of vet friends, and could be an interaction with them that is, they know is not personal. So how they interact with this is not an actual person that's judging them. It's just a program, and they could express themselves. And because that's what you have with especially with a lot of the veteran community, is that they don't, no matter what, you don't ever appear weak, and they're never going to say weak things to someone else, but they'll say it in a text. And because I have a bunch of that, they journal, they write their thoughts out. And if you go through, and I've had a couple of my vet friends, hey, read this. I just need somebody to read it. And when you read it, you look at them and think, I can't believe you actually expressed yourself like that, because emotions is not a thing in that community, not that type of emotions. And that's so there's good and bad in all of this, which gets into the whole, what are we doing with technology and who controls technology question. But I see it going in a good way, because I'm an optimist. I look at everything as saying, I get there's people pull bad stuff, but I love science and technology, and I get it can be used in bad ways, but I'm an optimist in thinking, okay, stop using it in a bad way. Think of how this can benefit everyone. And I don't see that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think you are an optimist. Absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, honestly, that's the thing, isn't it? It's responsible use of the technology. It's altruistic use, maybe, or humanitarian use of the technology. Absolutely. It's when we start getting into greed and really all I want to do is make a buck with the technology. That's different. We're talking about something very, very different than I want to release. Like the guy who created Bitcoin, he was not trying to do something that was going to become such a huge moneymaker, right? That was not apparently his intent. But you unleash something like that out in the world, it's going to be a very different thing. And I'm actually doing this project right now where I'm doing a digital art piece every day. Every morning I do a digital painting. And it's designed to sort of spark my ingenuity for the day, because that's one of the things that I work with my clients, is getting their teams, getting their people to get very innovative and very excited to do things. You have to pop that creative part of the brain. So I'm doing this painting a day, and I'm not a natural painter. That's not really what I do. But I'm doing it, and I'm loving it, actually. And a friend of mine who is very into the NFT world said, I want to mint. What was that?
That's what I was going to ask. Are they NFTs?
They're not NFTs, but 5 of them are going to be, because my friend Kiriaki, who is very big in the NFT world, said, I love your paintings. Let's mint 5 of them. And I'm like, okay. I don't know much about it, honestly, but one of the things that that I started doing is doing the research, and the environmental impact of NFTs, it's very frightening. So if I decided to let her do the 5, and by let her I mean she's doing the work. I supply the paintings, and am grateful to see where it goes, because I don't know anything about this really. I'm just starting to scratch the surface of the research. But the thing is, and there's a Wired article from just a couple days ago looking at exactly that, can artists be environmentally responsible if they're involved in NFTs? And I was in the middle of the article this morning and went, yeah, this is something I really need to do research on, because of the huge environmental impact of the amount of computer power it takes to do transactions in on the blockchain. And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, if I do NFTs, because at the end of this, I'm going to have 365 individual art pieces. If I decide to mint some of them as NFTs, I can only in good conscience, environmental educator here, right? I can only in good conscience do it if I can really find environmentally friendly, like water power, wind power, solar power, that's being used to do the computer programming. So that's the only way I can do it as someone who wants to be environmentally responsible. But more and more people are actually speaking up and saying, hey, it does not have to be this intense as far as how much energy is going towards all of this stuff on the blockchain. It doesn't have to be that way. And we're moving already towards more environmentally friendly practices because this is our home, right? This is the one planet we're not going anywhere for a while, even though they're all talking about, humans on Mars. But really, we're talking years and years and years away. So let's look at our home planet now and see what we can do to mitigate some of the catastrophic changes that are already taking place. That's one of the most important things. But the blockchain can be a beneficial contributing factor, and it can be a detrimental one. And I'm working in my way to go, let's move it towards the beneficial side of the spectrum.
Most likely you're going to have to put them in Iceland, with the servers in Iceland that's basically running off the thermal vents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you just mentioned something that's been on my mind for the last week, because after I talked to you, I guess Facebook or Google or somebody said, hey, look, Clyde's talking to someone that's worked at NASA. Here, show him some NASA articles. And according to what popped up, and I'm upset that I didn't even know it. That's my problem, is that we were supposed to go to the moon next year or this year. I didn't know that.
Oh my goodness. It's interesting. So a lot of it depends on what the administration is doing, what their focus is, right? So back in the 90s, there was a lot of the space shuttle this and the space program that and all of that. And I was at Goddard at the time. When George W. Bush became president, a lot of the sort of space work and all of that became a different kettle of corn, right? A lot of the focus left the Earth and moved much more towards space exploration. And in fact, I remember soil scientists, you would imagine they would be studying the soil on the Earth, but basically, if you wanted to get funding for your research, you had to look at how would soil work on Mars? How would we grow food on the moon? And that's a tough sell, right? That's an incredibly intense process as far as how you're going to actually bring up soil in order to grow, in order to, maybe you'll do hydroponics, but then you still have to bring the water over if you're coming to the moon or Mars. We don't really have access to these natural resources there. And because of that, the research started focusing on those places. But even if the funding goes there, if it's not there, the amount of money and resources and materials it will take to get water and soil and appropriate amounts of sunlight to grow crops so that people can actually populate these planets or the moon, as they say, is huge. Mm-hmm. So that kind of curtailed, and then things again during the Obama administration, during the Trump administration, because NASA is an executive branch agency, the president decides what's going to happen.
Yes.
Right. That's it. It's an executive branch agency. That's. So ultimately, the president is your boss. And if the president has, like with COVID right now, I'm sure that a lot of the funds that could be being used for going to the moon or whatever are being diverted where the focus is. I don't know. I don't work at NASA anymore, so I don't know exactly what the reasons are for that. But they're also finding new ways to have technology do the work for them, like with the James Webb Telescope, right? So we're talking about. I was at NASA when the Hubble went up, and it was incredible. And look at what we could see that we weren't able to see before. But James Webb is going to blow all of that out of the water, So, and it's interesting that I just saw a released picture from the European Space Agency that I think it was European Space Agency that they had this one, they focused on a part of the universe that basically they'd never focused on before that looked completely black. And they focused on it with Hubble, and Hubble went, oh, every dot you see is the star. And it's thousands upon thousands of dots in this one image. It's an infrared image. And then the European Space Agency, with a better telescope, focused on that same area. And they went, yeah, see all those dots? They're all galaxies. So we're talking billions of galaxies in the youngest part of the universe, because every single dot that they actually thought was a star apparently was a galaxy, and it's cajillions. It's amazing to look at all of these, and each one of those galaxies has untold numbers of stars, right? So we're talking monumental distances, monumental amounts of stars and galaxies and planets, just mind-boggling. And the focus now is, I think, and again, I can't speak for NASA since I don't work there and I don't have the right to speak for NASA, but it appears to me that when the technology can do it, when the tech can actually go and do the research for us, we're letting it, instead of having people going to the moon to do some of this research, we go, James Webb can do it and do it cheaper and do it much farther. And I think, yeah, let's see what's in some of these dark corners of the universe that we just don't know anything about. And telescopes like James Webb and some of the other tech that's coming up are going to be doing that and really exponentially increasing what we know.
I have a two-part question for you on that, and it's going to go into two spheres of what you do. And I've asked this of a couple people, and I don't think I will get an answer as good as I'm going to get from you. And the two-part question is, one, from what you just said, I take it that you feel that we should use robotics more than human in our space scientific pursuits. On that same question, what is your feeling about humanity and the metaverse and applying ourselves in our basically becoming more virtual with how we interact because of the environment, and how that will, if the majority of humanity was in a virtual type environment, our environmental impact on the earth would be in a lot of ways less.
Huge questions. Okay, so I think that we will always need a human element, no matter what. We'll always need a human element, in part because even though AR and VR and artificially intelligent machines can learn, can they actively be curious? That seems to be a uniquely living organism sort of process, if you will. So they can logically progress, making intuitive leaps. Maybe it's going to be possible. As of right now, I'm not sure it's still possible to have those intuitive leaps but made by machines. I don't know. I'm not well versed enough to know that. But I think we're always going to need some human element directing traffic, if you will, going, you know what? I think we should go there. Let's see what's there. Let's see what's in that part of the universe that we have never looked at before, right? So the machine can be trained on that and can really do the research, but can it make the decision to go there? Maybe you can program it to go, oh, I've exhausted all this. Now let me look over here where there's nothing. That's a way. But the curiosity piece, I think, is again, uniquely living organism. That's one part. The other part is, I think that your question is well, your point is well taken. And let me see if I can talk it through in a way that will make sense. And actually, let me finish answering the previous question. So the part where you say, is tech going to be the primary way we do some of this exploration when we're talking about space? I think it's going to be the primary way, because with the machines, they can do things for so much longer. I mean, look at some of the rovers and things that, you had to look at the Voyager. Voyager's a great example. Oh, it's got a it's got a 5-year mission. Great. 35, 45 years later, it's still going in the Kuiper Belt, right? So,
yes.
So it went further than we could possibly have imagined it going. And in fact, let me show you what the thing that I have. that might be interesting to you. I am in the middle of I'm in the middle of collecting dolls. Yes, I am. But who did I just get? I don't know if you can see her.
I can
This is
see her.
Katherine Johnson,
Yes.
right? So Katherine Johnson, for those who don't know, if you saw the movie Hidden Figures, she is the incredible mathematician who was able to do real-time math to get John Glenn back on the ground, right? And they just named a NASA center after her. And I think she lived long enough to see that happen, but then she just recently passed away this past year. But without her, bad things would have happened, right? Without these incredible human mathematicians who could do real-time math that would boggle our brains, none of it would have bad things would have happened, right? So the machines are great. And I say this a lot all over the place. I say it like this: technology is great until it isn't, right? And that's the and that's the problem, is once it fails, you're going to need someone to fix it. So the other part of your question is living in bubbles and things like that. If you read speculative fiction, and I love speculative fiction, Sherry Tepper, Marge Piercy, lots of people writing in it, and they're talking about, if you decimate the environment to such a degree that you have to live in bubbles, well, it's not just decimating the environment. There are going to be huge decreases in the amount of population we have. The bubbles are not going to be able to contain billions of people. It's just not going to be possible. And they're probably also not going to be able to contain the farms we're going to need to grow the food to feed the people. So I think that, yeah, if we're not careful, we're headed down that path. But I'm not sure that we can survive having to head down that path, right? Where the climate is changing. We can agree on that. Snow melt, the ice caps, all of that stuff. There's a wonderful scientist named Walid Abdullati who was NASA's chief scientist for a number of years, and he's an ice core guy, and he has this incredible presentation all about the sea level rise, essentially, with how much of our fresh water that's in the polar ice cap that's just melting into the salt water of the ocean, and we don't have a good desalinization process, so we could be in a world of hurt in about 50 years. And when you listen to him, and he goes, buy real estate, but buy real estate about 15 miles in. And we were like, what? He goes, yeah, because a lot of the shoreline's just going to be gone as sea level rises. Now, again, it's a long-term problem, right? It's a long-term problem, and we traditionally have some trouble looking at things long-term. So will we have to eventually? It is possible that we will have to eventually radically change how we live, and we might all be living in, like Biosphere 2, these geodesic domes, but all won't be 8 billion people. That will not be possible. So we're looking at dramatic decreases in population because the planet and where we leave it in 30 years or whatever won't be able to support that much life. So it's really tough to look at that and speculate and go, oh, will we? It might happen, but it won't happen for all 8 billion of us because there won't be room. There won't be. And so then that creates this huge downrolling effect of, how do you decide who gets to go into the dome, right? These are all horrific questions to have to contemplate, but unless we really modify what we're doing and how we're doing it, we're headed down some paths that are going to, again, just my opinion, but we're headed down some paths that we're going to really need to mitigate in order to forestall huge cataclysmic events.
Yeah, and I've been reading about the ice ages for years, and I'm a big proponent of the not by fire but by ice thought, the scientific experiment of how ice ages repeatedly show up throughout the geological span of Earth. But I was more asking about how, like right now with Facebook has Meta coming out, and I feel like Mark Zuckerberg jumped too fast trying to push
Okay.
Meta. But I was more talking about how, and I have, there's an Oculus Go here, there's an Oculus Rift there. This garage, and you're speaking a minute ago, you talked about actual how we're interacting on podcasts and VR. This garage, if you go online, there is an actual virtual rendition of this garage where you can come into the garage, and walk around and
That's
see
awesome.
all the technology, because there's a big server over there that we're training that AI on, and two 3D printers and lasers, and there's just a bunch of technology, and it's what this whole thing is made for. But as we as humanity step into the virtual environment, whether it's just
Mm-hmm.
VR headsets or it's actually using something like Neuralink, where we're able to fully step into and feel and interact, do you see that as being a good impact on the health of our environment as we move forward? Because more people will not consume as much. More people are basically just trading electrons back and forth, interacting. Not necessarily, I'm not talking about the Matrix completely, but something along those lines type thing, where I can, and I've had this discussion with people before, and they're like, okay, when you do that, and a lot of science fiction does this, where everybody goes into a virtual multiverse, everybody's living there, working there, and everybody forgets about the Earth. I, on the other hand, do not feel like it's going to be that way. It's going to basically put a bunch of people not affecting the Earth and allow smaller groups of people to help the Earth heal itself. And don't get me wrong, it might be in a bad way. It might be a person putting a VR headset on to go into the virtual world, to turn around, to interact with a robot that's out here fixing the Earth. So, I mean, instead of you actually walking out there fixing it yourself, you're in a virtual environment of a robot that's out there fixing it. And that's a conundrum that it doesn't
Mhm.
always look well. But that's a progression that I see coming, is more people they're not actually experiencing reality except through a virtual environment. And to me, when I look at it as how much trash we make, how much we eat and consume, and how materialistic we are, if all that materialistic parts, and if you look at my garage, I'm very materialistic. All that is taking place in a virtual world. So it's not actually, you're not throwing 30 water bottles away a day. You're actually just drinking water out of a tube because you're in a virtual environment.
Okay, so it's very that what you're describing to me sounds very Matrix-like, and as we know from the Matrix, they wanted to not be in the Matrix, right? So, and why? Because it's about, I guess it's about choice, right? Do I want to be in the virtual world where I see that I am, floating lazily in a bioluminescent algae bay that's completely clean? Yeah, but is it real? Right. So I would love that. I would love to be sipping a pina colada on a tropical beach. That sounds amazing. But that, to me, experiencing it with goggles on or even gloves. There, Laurie Anderson, the futurist and the musician, she had at the New York Metropolitan Museum of Natural History, the American Natural History Museum, that's what it's called. And she had this virtual VR thing where you don the little glasses and you have the little gloves and you walk around and there's just one point at which you're on a cliff and you fall off the cliff. And everybody, I did it. And I was very happy that I did it. Everybody was like, ah, right. Because it starts feeling, it wasn't a fully fleshed out virtual world. It was black and white and it felt more like Tron than it felt like an actual VR world. But yeah, your senses can pretty easily adapt to what you're seeing and hearing. We can adapt to that. Does it mean it's a good thing for you? It depends, right? Because I'm going to be very honest with you, Clyde. I believe that no matter what happens, the Earth, until 4.5 billion years from now, when the sun goes either red giant or supernova, depending on its size at the time, the Earth is going to be fine. The Earth will be fine. The Earth will go through some stuff, but the planet will be fine. The living species on the planet might all die out, but the planet, no problem. So when we're talking about living in a virtual world and not there and therefore not using as many resources, right? Because you're drinking water from a tube instead of using plastic bottles. Yeah, sure. But again, I'm selfish. I'm extremely selfish. I want to live on a planet where if I want to ride my bike to the ocean, because I live about a 35-minute ride from the ocean, If I want to ride my bike to the ocean or take the subway to the ocean and spend time in that beautiful water on a sunny day, I want to be able to do that, right? I don't necessarily just want to plug in my headset and put on the gloves and go, okay, I'm by the ocean virtually. So both have to be true, right? The key for me is that we address some of these huge issues that are present right now, so that frankly that we keep the planet healthy and whole as much as possible for all the living species on the planet, right? It's not a zero sum game here. We must do something in order to make those changes so that we can survive. Because again, the planet, totally fine. The planet's going to be just fine for 4.5 billion years. Yes, there might be times when it's uninhabitable for living species, but it's got 4.5 billion years to keep the experiment going, right? So I'm not worried about the Earth. I'm worried about us and other species like us, all the different living, the biosphere, that part of it, the living species. If it's uninhabitable for us, it's going to suck for us, right? So that's why I'm like, okay, let's leave small, that whole thing where take only photographs, leave only footprints. I'm all about that, right? I do not want to be a resource user past what I'm myself am entitled to, right? If I take more than I need, and we're really the only species that does that, we're the only species that takes more than we need. If I take more than I need, that means that I'm really robbing someone else of their share. And I personally don't want to do that. So that's where I sit on that, is I want us to all work together to bring us back, or maybe through this really tumultuous time, to where we're all much more aware, like your kids are, of our environment, of our impact on it, of technology's role in living on this planet. So I don't want to say, okay, I'm going to go into a pod because that's the only way to save the earth. I want to make changes way before then. I want us to really become aware of our impact on the environment way before any of that. Because the metaverse is cool, but I see it as a place to visit rather than a place to live.
And I like that. You gave me an insight that I did not think you were going to have about the Earth, because I don't hear that from a lot of people that think about our impact on the Earth. Is a lot of times they're not going to say, no matter what we do, the Earth is still going to be here and she's going to be okay. We might not be
Mhm.
interacting with her anymore, which is a whole nother
Right.
level. And I was giving you that question not because I believe it. I do believe that we as humanity will majorly, I know I did not say that correctly, but be in a virtual environment because of work and because of a lot of other stuff. But I do not believe Facebook's metaverse is where it's at. I think, and it's the part that Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg missed when he is trying to roll out the metaverse right now, is he's using complete VR and not using a lot of AR. Because, for example,
Mm.
I have all the VR in this garage and it's fun. It's a game a lot of times, but you do not have, I can't put that on and see this garage and interact with this garage in a AR type environment. And that level he is not there. Once that level gets there, and for example, I can walk down the street with a pair of AR glasses on and interact in a virtual world at the same time interact with reality, you've sold me completely. My glasses will always be charged. But that's the layer that's not completely here yet, and they've not made it here enough for us to adapt. I'm like I said, I have them all. I very rarely play with them. People come over and they play with them because they don't have it in their life like I do. But the games are fun. The games are very realistic. I mean, super realistic. And that, as I see my kids grow up and how they interact with technology, and this is something that I didn't even think about until recently, was I'm a big proponent of Neuralink, about when Elon Musk said, look, the whole purpose of Neuralink is that we are communicating with two thumbs and we're slow. It changed my, I never, and I've been a big proponent of the whole scientific adapting of getting in our brains to a point. I want control, but of it doing. But when you explain to me that really I'm slow with these two thumbs texting everyone, and Neuralink is going to allow me to interact. It has a whole bunch of other things it can do, good, bad, whatever. But being able to get out there and interact with technology faster is a big thing for me, because how much I can do right now, it's slow compared to what I know my brain can interact with technology with. And it's a step. It's a step I feel in the right direction. Do you have you researched any on Neuralink?
I have not. This is something that I should. This could derail our whole conversation, but I'm going to do it anyway. I am not. I'm vegan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in animal testing, and Neuralink is being tested on primates, and that is something I cannot abide.
Okay.
So, testing it, we test on animals, and then think that it's going to operate the same way on human animals, and it's not. Almost never does it. So I don't support that method of testing and that method of technology unless you're actually doing it in a way that isn't cruel to
Okay.
another species or to our own species. So looking at it from, if I were going to look at, can the brain process information and imagine and think and formulate hypotheses and do the testing and all this other stuff scientifically or imaginatively, and can it therefore interact really well with technology and much faster than our thumbs can? Sure, absolutely. That's science fiction wise, that's the Matrix, right? That was
Yes.
the Matrix, and so fully fleshed out that billions of organisms thought this is real. And that's really cool. But look at how they were living in reality. In reality, they were, they had that thing attached into the back of their skull, right up into their cerebellum. And therefore, that's how all of their memories, all of their thoughts, all of their ideas were able to be interacted with. Personally, I think, it's cool in theory. In practice, to make it work, you're going to have to, break a lot of eggs, as they say. So personally, I would like to see us go a little differently. I like what Star Trek did, if we're going to look at science fiction. In Star Trek 4, Voyage Home, when they end up back in 1984, and there's that moment where Scotty's trying to interact with the little Macintosh computer, and he goes, "Computer," right? And the computer, of course, is quiet. It doesn't do voice recognition. So then somebody hands him a mouse, and he picks up the mouse, and he goes, "Computer," and that was wrong too, right? That wasn't a microphone, because what was he used to? He was used to being able to go, "This is what I want you to do, computer," and the computer would go, working and do its thing. So before we go towards the brain power is what does it, I say let's have a transition between fingers and thumbs to voice, right? And voice to text is huge. Look at Alexa, look at Hey Google, look at Siri, all of that stuff. If I can think it and say it, by gum, I can get it to do it. So if I were going to say what should the trajectory be, I would say don't do Neuralink yet. Don't do something that is potentially harming other beings. Instead, look at how we can match the communication patterns of our speech, of our listening, of our communication and collaborations that can be forged without unnecessary cruelty to other species. So that would be my trajectory. Rather than immediately going to the brain, I would say, like with podcasting, right? This is something fascinating. So Rob Greenlee was talking about this. This is the Libsyn guy. He was talking about how podcasting was really taking off in 2004, 2005 when he first got into it. And then he said, and then social media came along and it blew podcasting out of the water. It just rolled right past podcasting. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, okay, why? Why did it do that? And I didn't stupidly, I didn't ask him his idea, but I thought of my idea of why it did that. And I think it did that because there was no barrier to entry, right? With
Correct.
podcasting, look at all the equipment you have. Look at all the equipment I have. There's equipment that you need or that you feel you need, like, good headphones, a good microphone, blah, blah, blah. You don't. You need a phone and one of the apps that allows you to podcast for free. But we start thinking that we do. So, and in that time in 2004, 2005 was huge. If you're going to do it, you're going to have all the right toys. Social media came along and wow, you don't need that. You had LiveJournal, you had MySpace, and then of course Facebook came in and blew everyone else out of the water. Why? Because it encouraged interaction, and anybody, grandmothers, great grandfathers, people who are, who would otherwise never use technology jumped on. And so we've had all these other, Twitter into TikTok into what is it called? Octi. There's all sorts of ones, right? There's all sorts of different tech that's come along. And I think it's because we're now getting a little fatigued of social media. People are dropping Facebook. They're dropping some of them because of incessant ads and people being really mean and nasty. And so podcasting is becoming a thing. And we went in 2020 to 2021, we went from 700,000 active podcasts to almost 3 million active podcasts. Now, if you look at that and you go, okay, but there are 500 or 600 million blogs out there, podcasting is very small, but more and more people are adapting it and sort of turning away from social media a little bit because you can't tell what's real, right?
Yes.
People are like, oh, I always look this good, right? And no, they don't. Of course not. There was a whole sorts of, I did my hair and I did my lipstick and I did my this and I did my that and I'm wearing a certain top and all of this stuff that is made to look like, oh, no, I just got up out of bed. You didn't, right? You didn't just get out of bed. But we start comparing our B-roll, as they say, to someone else's greatest hits. And
Yes.
it's not a positive interaction, and it's not a way to affirm for yourself who you are and where you are. So people are leaving social media in some ways, and they're looking for other ways to communicate and collaborate. Podcasting is one of them. Why? Because again, we realize that there's not such a barrier to entry, and also you want to interact, but you also want to have your say, right? So you can do a podcast like you and I with interview. You can do your own where you're talking like Pump Up the Volume, if you remember that Christian Slater movie.
I do.
Or I love that movie. So, or you can do, StreamYard, Streamlab, where you do live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. And so you can be out there, you can have interactivity, and you can be pretty real because you're not like right now. Yeah, what time is it here? It's 9. It's a little after 10 here, 10 in the morning. And, my cats woke me up at 6:00 this morning by walking out of my head. And so, that's what they do, especially Zephyr Kitten. He's very into like, I'm going to chew on your hair until you wake up and feed me. But my point in saying this is that, we are getting to have an interaction that's really authentic because, you said you do zero show prep. I love that. I do some for my show, but I love that we're getting to have a conversation about what your curiosity, where it leads us, So to me, so much of this is the human element, right? Would an AR go, wait, let me ask you this question about the multiverse? I don't know if an AR would do that. It takes that human ingenuity that I think is always going to be the critical piece in any of these innovations.
And you laid it out perfectly, because that's the whole reason I'm on podcasts, is because when I listen to a podcast and I have a lot of drive time in my life, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I catch myself if it's not a conversation, I don't listen that long. And that is what I get out of a lot of podcasts, and I learn a lot, is because it's two people or three that's sitting there just having a conversation and expressing their ideals about things. And that's what I want with this, is people just expressing their ideals about science and technology and where it's going and how we interact and how we interchange with it. And that is what I look for in podcasts. So that's what I'm trying to do. on that
Hmm.
same level where you talk about you don't know how AI is going to ask those questions. I don't know how much you follow AI, but like yesterday or sometime this week, um, OpenAI come out and said that they feel that their transformer artificial intelligence is semi-conscious.
Wow.
Yeah, the same thing I said. A lot of people come out and said, "Slow down. What the hell are you talking about?" Me with Hayes Division, or Hayes Division really started as a collaborative of me and a couple other guys that's really into science and technology that work in that field. We just started working on stuff, and it turned into us building a big server. And we actually have some Python programs on there trying to create a cultural artificial intelligence, basically an AI that would take your culture and the things you like and interact with you on that area. So I reached
Hmm.
out and did a lot of researching and got with a bunch of people in the artificial intelligence field, and OpenAI was one of them. They gave me beta access to GTP3 when it was first coming out, and I interacted with
Hmm.
it, and it was crazy. The things that GTP3 could talk back to me and interact with me on was a whole nother level. And this was a year and a half ago. So
Hmm.
from there to now, OpenAI is saying their program is semi-conscious. That's I don't even know what to think about it.
Well, I mean, if you look at, again, speculative fiction, when we're talking about what are the next steps in human evolution, are they some sort of a combination or hybrid between an AI and a human being? It's possible. Is it possible that there would be some sort of a neural net? It's possible. These are all things that are potentially possible, but with nanotech, you might be able to replicate cells. I honestly, it's one of those things that blows my mind because I grew up with science fiction and thought of it as oh, yeah, this, I guess it's possible, but it's not real, so I can move on. Yet look at the flip phone, right? Star Trek was the inspiration for the flip phone, and so many other, and the tricorder is another one. Somebody just came out with that, they came out with like a working lightsaber from Star Wars. Because why? Because Star Wars sparked their curiosity about, is it possible? Can we do it? And again, somebody thought of it, put it in a movie or in a book, and somebody else went, I'm going to see if I can do that. So with AI being semi-conscious, is it possible? I can't say it's not possible. I don't know. That's great. I don't know how we measure that sort of thing. Like, how do you measure consciousness? How do you measure someone's ability to make those decisions, to make those thoughts happen, to be inspired? How can you measure that effectively so that you can measure that effectively in a machine? I would it's a great area to hypothesize and to wonder about, but I don't know personally that we're ever going to get to that point where we can actually go, yeah, we can totally measure that. Maybe we will. I don't know.
But how
I
far do
don't
we
know
have
that
to
the
go?
technology is there.
How
Say it
far
again.
would we have to go? Have you read Isaac Asimov's original iRobot?
Sure.
Okay, so everything I took from that book, and of course I read it when I was young and then reread it, watched all the movies. The main thing I took from that book was when you make something that can become conscious, it's a person. It has rights. And and when I heard this, that my first thought was, we need to be talking about, if this thing is really conscious, it has rights. You I don't know that, maybe it's me reading all the science fiction growing up, is that if something can think, and I want to say feel, but I mean it's not feelings. When something can think and make statements about what, I don't know, it's the soft side of me that says, if this is a conscious thing, you don't turn it off, you don't kill it. And that is the discussion that's going on in my brain right now with the whole if we do make conscious beings, if it's possible or whatever stance, what is how do we interact with it? What does it have rights? Can it? I want to say vote, but can it? Is it a being?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm thinking of science fiction again, or fantasy, if you will, the droids in Star Wars,
Yes.
right? If you look at them, if you look at C-3PO, R2-D2, the little round one, the name of which are something D8, R4D8, whatever it was. I know the original movie's much better than the follow-ups, but they're servants. They are indentured. They don't have any rights. And yet, very obviously, they can feel. Very obviously, they can connect with humans and with one another. Look at the friendship between C-3PO and R2-D2. And yet they call their humans master, right? Mistress Leia, Princess Leia, Master Luke, right? So these are very this is a very hierarchical distinction between bioorganisms and electrical organisms, maybe computer organisms. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, they are, if you look at them, they are servants or slaves, right? Down to calling Luke master. And it's when I look at it with adult eyes, I'm very disturbed by it personally. Because I would never want to enslave anyone. I would never want to make anyone do for me without any sort of reciprocity, whether it's paying them or saying thank you, whatever it is.
Correct.
So it's very uncomfortable for me. It's an incredibly uncomfortable thought. And your question being, are they, what do we owe a being that we create? Wow. Yeah. I mean, on the organic level, we create, you have 7 creations, you have 7 sons, right? So those are beings that you are responsible for until they grow up enough to go off on their own. But I'm sure that as a parent, you will feel somewhat responsible for them for the rest of their lives. If you create a being that is conscious, that is, instead of being carbon-based, let's say it's silicon-based or whatever the material is it any less alive? Is being a carbon-based life form the only thing that distinguishes us from other replicating beings? Don't know, and that brings us into a really weird gray area. Let's say we decide that someone the difference between a mule and a donkey, right? One of them is sterile. So one of them does not have quite the same status because they can't reproduce and make more. So we can reproduce. I can't anymore, right? Postmenopausal, cannot reproduce.
We can't either. Not in this house.
Well, there you go. But looking at it in that perspective, does that make me any less of a person? Of course not. Of course not. I am no less a person than I was when I was in my reproductive years. And so if we're looking at AI or we're looking at living beings, and obviously this is speculative, but look at it from that perspective, they cannot replicate. They are made sterile. Boom, unless they build one of themselves.
Correct.
But that's not coming of them. But that does that make them less a being? If we were to accept that one of these droids, our C-3PO, has rights, is a being, even though he can't make more of himself, does he have any less rights because he can't make more of himself? Since as humans, those of us who are not able to reproduce, who are sterile or whatever, are we less human? Are we less beings? Are we less alive? These are all, now we're getting into real philosophy here, but it's something to think about. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. C-3PO thinks.
That's right.
Absolutely. So how do we make those distinctions and define those parameters? It's a question for the ages. And I think that we what we owe to each other is to be extremely compassionate to those who are like us and those who are not like us. Why? Because you never know what someone else is going through.
And I completely agree with that statement, because I have that a lot of times. People, when you're interacting with a wait staff, or you're interacting with a local government or something, you have to remember those are real people. Those are real people like you and
Mm-hmm.
me. They have lives, and they're doing a job right now. But just because that, and people don't, and I blame it on social media and the internet and everything else right now. Is there's a level of distance that people have between everything in their life, and
Mm-hmm.
they can be mean, or they can express something they would not express in person, or if they were interacting with that. For
Sure.
example, say the robots. We can say right now that a robot is just a servant. It does not have rights, etc. All. But until you sit there with CTB30, and you're interacting with him, and you see that level, and the only way I know how to explain it is that level of humanity that's in that robot. And I'll be honest with you, it I would say it has rights. You can't turn CP30. You cannot turn him off, because he's not forever. Because he's cool. He has he acts like he has emotions. He interacts with me, and that goes. And we do that with our vehicles. We do that with our computers and our phones. We name everything. We interact with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
I I see it happening. I see, as these things actually think and interact more, I see us saying, "Hey, this is not just a robot." It, and I don't know if it's just going to be on an individual level, like where a family has a robot that I had it, and now my grandkids have it, and it can tell stories, and everybody keeps that robot going on, because it's like grandma that's lived forever and knows everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we got some big roads in our future in tech, in humanity, and the how we interact with technology, especially when it comes to these points where we feel this is a living thing, but it's not. It's living in an electronic stance, and I don't know where we go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big question, and it's one that's, can they experience emotion? Can they experience pain? Can they experience fear? Can they experience? And on that level, we're going to have to eventually decide those parameters. What do we decide is sentience? What do we decide is emotional intelligence? What do we decide is life? And I leave technology and science behind when I say, I'm like, let's save all the animals first. That's my thing, right? Save the environment, save the animals. And when I start thinking about computers, machines, robots, all of that, absolutely, we need to look at that moving forward. In part because, um, I'm such a movie freak. Blade Runner is a great example of there are no more real live animals, right? There just aren't any. Boom, that's it. And this was supposed to be, Blade Runner was supposed to be 2017 when it originally came out. 2017 seemed like it was so far in the future.
Yes, it
Nope.
did.
Came, it came and went, right? So, but look at Ridley Scott's vision of this dystopia where it's always raining because we're always in some form of nuclear winter, and the populations are ridiculous. The buildings are huge. Nobody's eaten a piece of fresh fruit in years because it's all gone, right? And somebody has Joanna Cassidy's character, Zora, has a snake, a python that she's doing this dance with, right, in that one scene. And of course, the snake isn't real. Why? Because snakes died out ages ago, right? So when you see an animal in that world, they're not real. None of them are considered organic life forms, right? They're not considered like a cat. They're an artificial creation. And when I saw that, I went, oh, what a bummer. I would hate to live in a world where there were no more cats or dogs.
Because I've just realized that no matter what I do with my podcast, I'm achieving something. And the reason I say this is because my kids watch all my podcasts. And when they watch them, they tell me, Dad, you're such a nerd, la la la. But they listen to them. And I will tell you, I do not feel like my younger kids, will ever watch that movie at all and see what we see. But you just pointed out a fact that they will listen through this podcast and realize that there was no animals as in the 1980s, 1990s when that movie come out. How we seen the future, there was no animals. My kids have all kinds of animals. And having this conversation and bringing that to light, that as we look in the future, this is what people are saying that in the past that we seen coming, and it did happen. But it didn't happen not because it couldn't happen. It didn't happen because we as people are striving to make the world better. And so pay attention that this is
Right.
when you look at the future, make good things happen. And thank you for
Absolutely.
that, because you referenced something that a lot of people are not thinking about, and that's something we have to think about. And the thing is that it's past 2017 and we have animals. I have a lot of animals. A lot of animals. I have bees in my
Yay.
backyard that we love. And when I was growing up, the bees were going to go away. Everybody was saying we're going to stop pesticides and everything, and I'm for that completely, and I think we helped. But bees were going to be a thing of the past. And I have 2 hives in the backyard right now that my kids, they suit up in bee suits and go out there and interact with them all the time. I really want to thank you for this interview and for coming on here, because you gave me so much to think about and interaction. I do have a question that you brought up something earlier. So I do electronics, and you mentioned that in, I think, the 90s, you worked at Goddard Space Flight Center and did technical support. How many times did you tell those people to turn it off and turn it back on?
Countless. Countless. And then of course the caps lock key. I once got into huge trouble because the scientist swore up and down that I had broken into his office in the middle of the night and changed his password. And he went not to my boss, not to my boss's boss, but my boss's boss's boss, and yelled at him for, Izolda did this. And I walked into his office, and Dave contacted Izolda, you need to get over to Patrick's office. You need to fix this. Okay. So I walk into his office. He's got a tornado between his ears. He's just like, and he's yelling at me. And I looked down at his keyboard and I press the caps lock key so that it turns off. And I go, try it again. And he goes, oh, you fixed it. Oh, no, I didn't. And this is not anything against the NASA scientists. This is the best way I have to say it is this. These folks are brilliant, and their heads are not on the day-to-day. Their heads are in their next level, right? They're thinking about what are the ways we can save the planet? What satellite might be able to read the soil moisture? And there is a satellite up there reading soil moisture all over the planet. Why? Because some scientists thought, with climate change, with farming practices the way they are, we need to know what is the moisture level of the soil, so we know whether or not it needs to be irrigated so we can grow the crops that will feed the planet, right? So they're not thinking about, did I remember to put my pants on today? They're not thinking about that. Because they're thinking, and again, nothing against them. These are brilliant, amazing people. And they're not thinking about their lunch. They're thinking about how to save the world. They're thinking about how to explore parts of the universe that haven't been explored yet. So the caps lock key for me was one of those moments where I was like, please don't yell at me. But also there is a certain amount of know what you know and know what you don't know. I love this story, actually. This is from my landmarks and literature class. ninth grade, and Mrs. Citron, brilliant teacher, walks into the class. We're all a bunch of, 13-year-old, 14-year-old ninth graders, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, first year of high school. And she walks on into the classroom, and she takes a chalk and she draws a sideways boot on the chalkboard. And she says, "What is that?" And we're all like, "It's a boot." She goes, "What is that?" And then Alex Glatter goes, "That's Italy." And she went, "Yes." And we're all like, "What?" And she shows us a map, and Italy, it looks like kind of a sideways boot.
Yep.
And she said, "You have to know what you know, and you have to know what you don't know, and you have to imagine the rest." And 14 years old, she blew my mind. And so these scientists, they know what they know, and they don't need to know what they don't know. Why? Because somebody else is taking care of that for them, because they're too busy imagining and figuring out some of these big issues.
I love that. Hey, thank you for coming on here, and thank you for having this conversation with me, because I'm telling you, I'm learning so much, and I want to say that more people need to have these conversations, just because the picture you see or the little comment you see on Facebook, that's just a part of life. There's this bigger part out here where two people, four people, six people engage in conversation, and it's not always it's not always an argument. It's not always your politics versus my politics. It's what we do as humans is we interact, we talk, we feel. That is what's important. And thank you for being here. Do you have anything you want
Thank you for
to
having me.
promote, or anything you got going on that you want to get out there? I mean, I'll put show notes in here with all your stuff. But
Oh, thank you so much. I let's see. Right now, the big thing that I'm promoting, if you will, is my podcast, where I'm talking about innovation again through creativity, through sparking your ingenuity, so that you can have those imagine if moments and then act on them. Right? To me, it's ethical innovation. So it's really solving problems creatively while you're trying to do the right thing. So anytime we can talk about that, about how to do things ethically in a way that will really help us save the planet, save ourselves, really work on collaboration, creativity, curiosity, communication, all of my C's, I love them. That's what I'm promoting all the time. And as far as my writing, I have a book called Speak from Within that I'm promoting right now, which is all about how to engage and inspire and motivate audiences, how to be a speaker who's comfortable in your own skin, so that you can really focus on the ideas and the far-flung thoughts instead of being nervous about what you're about to say. So that's the other thing that I'm really focusing on right now.
thank you, and I really appreciate you being on here. And everyone, go check her podcast out and get her book, because this is it. If you do what you just did on here on everything else, you're making a change, and I appreciate that. And that's what we're all here for. That's what life is. Life is moving forward and experiencing, and a lot of people don't get that sometimes. So thank you again. Clyde Hays out.